The medical bay of the Galactic Research Station Harmony buzzed with activity as scientists from dozens of species worked together on various projects. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the few human researchers aboard the station, carefully adjusted the environmental controls in her laboratory section. The soft hum of life support systems created a steady background noise that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat during her 3-year assignment here. Sarah had always been fascinated by xenobiology, the study of alien life forms. When the opportunity arose to work on Harmony, she jumped at the chance. The station orbited a neutron star in a region where multiple civilizations converged, making it the perfect location for collaborative research. Here, she had worked alongside the brilliant Zephyrian mathematicians with their crystalline minds, the methodical Corvan engineers with their multiple arms perfectly suited for complex machinery, and the wise Altarian philosophers whose centuries of life experience provided unique perspectives on existence itself. The morning shift had just begun when the emergency klaxons started blaring throughout the station. Sarah looked up from her microscope, her heart racing. Emergency calls were rare on Harmony, which prided itself on being a peaceful haven for scientific advancement. She quickly sealed her current experiment and rushed toward the Central Command Center, joining streams of researchers from other sections. Commander Vexhai, a tall Altarian with silver skin that shimmered under the station's lights, stood before the main viewing screen. His usually calm demeanor showed signs of strain as he addressed the gathering crowd. Fellow researchers, his voice carried the weight of authority that came from 2 centuries of leadership experience. We have received a distress signal from an uncharted sector. A vessel appears to be in critical condition. The main screen flickered to life, showing a grainy image of what could barely be called a spacecraft. The vessel looked more like a twisted sculpture of metal and organic matter, pulsing with an eerie bioluminescent glow. Strange appendages extended from its hull like the tentacles of some deep-sea creature, and parts of its surface seemed to ripple as if alive. Even through the static-filled transmission, Sarah could see that whatever had built this ship thought very differently from any known species. Dr. Kethmore, a Zephyrian whose crystalline body reflected light in rainbow patterns when agitated, stepped forward. "Commander, the energy readings from that vessel are unlike anything in our databases. The biomechanical fusion suggests a technology that bridges organic and artificial systems in ways we've never encountered." Sarah found herself drawn to the screen, her scientific curiosity overriding any sense of caution. The ship's design reminded her of certain Earth organisms she had studied, particularly deep ocean creatures that had evolved under extreme pressure. There was something hauntingly beautiful about its alien architecture, even in its apparent distress. "What's their condition?" asked Dr. Thane. A Corvan whose 4 arms moved in complex gestures as he spoke, a sign of deep concern among his people. Commander Vexhai consulted his data pad, his expression growing more troubled. "Life support appears to be failing. We're detecting massive system failures throughout their vessel. If we don't act quickly, whoever is aboard that ship will not survive the next few hours." A murmur of discussion rippled through the assembled scientists. Sarah listened as various species began voicing their concerns. The Zephyrians worried about potential contamination of their crystalline matrices by unknown organic compounds. The Corvans expressed anxiety about their mechanical implants interfacing with such radically different technology. The Altarians spoke of ancient protocols about contact with completely unknown species. "We should maintain safe distance," suggested Dr. Kethmore, his crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. "Unknown biologics could pose significant risks to silicon-based life forms like ourselves." "Agreed," added Dr. Thane, his mechanical augmentations whirring softly. "My species has protocols against exposure to unanalyzed organic synthetic hybrid technologies. The risk of system corruption is too high." Sarah felt a growing sense of unease as she listened to the discussions around her. Every species seemed to have valid reasons for maintaining distance from the dying ship. The Drakmari cited potential psychological contamination from alien thought patterns. The Nexus Collective worried about their networked consciousness being compromised by unknown mental frequencies. One by one, each species present found scientific or cultural reasons to avoid direct contact. "Commander," Sarah found herself speaking before she had fully formed her thoughts, "what about a rescue mission? We can't just let them die." The Altarian leader turned his ancient eyes toward her, and Sarah felt the weight of centuries of wisdom in that gaze. "Dr. Chen, your human compassion is admirable, but we must consider the safety of everyone aboard this station. The risks are simply too great for any of our species to undertake direct contact." "But surely there's something we can do," Sarah pressed, feeling increasingly isolated as the representatives of various species continued to cite reasons why their people couldn't participate in a rescue attempt. Dr. Jara, a Vorthon whose gaseous form shimmered in its containment suit, spoke in harmonious tones. "The electromagnetic field fluctuations from their vessel could disrupt our energy matrix completely. For us, even approaching that ship could mean death." The more Sarah listened, the more apparent it became that every species had biological, technological, or cultural barriers that made contact dangerous or impossible for them. The Zephyrians' silicon-based biology made them vulnerable to organic contamination. The Corvins' technological implants could be corrupted by the ship's biomechanical systems. The Altarians' telepathic abilities made them susceptible to alien mental influences. Each species had evolved along paths that made them incompatible with whatever was dying in that strange vessel. "So, we're just going to watch them die?" Sarah's voice carried a note of frustration that surprised even herself. Commander Vexhai's expression softened slightly. "Dr. Chen, I understand your desire to help, but consider the perspective of each species here. We have all evolved specific biological and technological adaptations that, while making us powerful in our own domains, also create vulnerabilities when facing the completely unknown." Sarah looked around the room at her colleagues, people she had worked with and respected for 3 years. She saw the genuine regret in their expressions, the conflict between their desire to help and their very real limitations. For the first time since joining the galactic community, she felt truly alone. "What about humans?" she asked quietly. "Are there any specific biological or technological barriers that would prevent humans from attempting contact?" The room fell silent as every pair of eyes, optical sensors, and energy detection apparatus focused on her. Commander Vexhai consulted his databanks, his fingers dancing over holographic interfaces as he accessed detailed files on human biology and technology. After several long moments, he looked up with an expression Sarah had never seen before, a mixture of surprise, confusion, and something that might have been admiration. "According to our databases, humans are remarkably unremarkable from a biological standpoint. No silicon-based systems to contaminate, no collective consciousness to disrupt, no energy matrix to destabilize. Your technology is primitive enough to be largely incompatible with advanced corruption vectors, and your mental structure is isolated enough to resist most forms of psychic interference." Dr. Kethmore's crystalline form pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as excitement in his species. "That's actually quite fascinating. Humans exist in a sort of biological and technological neutral zone. Not advanced enough to be vulnerable to sophisticated attacks, not specialized enough to be susceptible to targeted disruptions." "Are you saying," Sarah began slowly, "that humans might be the only species here that could safely make contact with that ship?" Commander Vexahai nodded slowly, his ancient features showing a new respect for the young human scientist. It appears that what we have always considered humanity's greatest weakness, your lack of specialization, your primitive technology, your biological mundaneness, might actually be your greatest strength in this situation. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as the implications hit her. Every other species in the galaxy had evolved or developed themselves beyond the point where they could safely interact with the completely unknown. They had become so specialized, so advanced, so perfectly adapted to their niches that they had lost the flexibility to handle the truly alien. Humans, meanwhile, remained generalists. They were the galactic equivalent of the Swiss Army knife, not the best at any one thing, but capable of handling whatever came their way. While other species had transcended their biological limitations, humans had simply learned to work around them. "I volunteer," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. "If humans are the only ones who can do this, then I'll go." The room erupted in concerned voices from multiple species, all expressing worry for her safety. But underneath their concern, Sarah detected something else: hope. They wanted to save the dying ship's occupants, but their very evolution had made them unable to do so. Only humans, in their stubborn refusal to transcend their limitations, retained the ability to take such risks. Commander Vexhai raised his hand for silence. "Dr. Chen, this would be extremely dangerous. We know nothing about the occupants of that vessel, their biology, their technology, or their intentions." "That's exactly why it has to be a human," Sarah replied. "We're the only ones primitive enough to survive the encounter and adaptive enough to figure out how to help them." As she spoke, Sarah realized she was articulating something that had been developing in her mind since arriving at the station. Every other species she had met was magnificent in their own way. The Zephyrians with their crystal clarity of thought, the Corvins with their perfect fusion of biology and technology, the Altarians with their centuries of accumulated wisdom. But in becoming magnificent, they had also become fragile. Humans remained unspecialized, unaugmented, unremarkable. They were still essentially the same species that had crawled out of caves and wondered what lay beyond the next hill. That primitive curiosity and adaptability, which seemed so inferior compared to the achievements of other species, might be exactly what was needed now. "Very well," Commander Vexhai said after a long pause. "But you won't go alone. We'll provide you with the best protective equipment we can design and maintain constant communication. At the first sign of danger, you extract immediately." Sarah nodded, though she suspected that once she was aboard that strange vessel, extraction might not be a simple matter. As the other scientists began discussing technical preparations, she found herself staring at the screen showing the dying ship. Something about its biomechanical design called to her on a level she couldn't quite explain. Perhaps it was because humans had always existed at the intersection of nature and technology, never fully abandoning their biological roots even as they reached for the stars. They built machines, but machines that served human purposes. They modified their environment, but they remained recognizably human. Other species had transcended such limitations, but humans had simply carried them along. Now, for the first time, that stubborn refusal to evolve beyond recognition might be exactly what the galaxy needed. The preparations took 6 hours. Sarah found herself suited in a composite environmental suit that combined the best protective technologies from multiple species, all adapted to work with human biology. The suit was a work of art in itself, incorporating Zephyrian energy shields, Corvin mechanical redundancies, and Altarian mental protection barriers. As she stood in the shuttle bay preparing for launch, representatives from every species on the station came to wish her well. Dr. Kethmore presented her with a crystalline communication device that would maintain contact even through electromagnetic interference. Dr. Thane provided her with a multi-tool that could interface with virtually any known technology. The other scientists offered various pieces of equipment, advice, and encouragement. but it was Commander Vexahai's final words that stayed with her as the shuttle launched toward the dying vessel. "Dr. Chen," he had said, "today you represent not just humanity, but something we thought we had left behind in our evolutionary past, the courage to face the unknown without the protection of specialization. We'll be watching and learning from your example." As the shuttle approached the alien vessel, Sarah got her first clear look at the ship that had brought all the advanced species of the galaxy to a standstill. It was even more beautiful and terrifying up close, its biomechanical surfaces pulsing with fading light patterns that reminded her of a dying heartbeat. The ship's design defied easy categorization. Parts of it looked grown rather than built, with organic curves that flowed into mechanical structures. Appendages that might have been sensors or weapons or something else entirely extended from its hull like the limbs of a sleeping creature. The surface seemed to shift slightly as she watched, as if the ship itself was breathing. Sarah docked with what appeared to be an airlock, though it was unlike any airlock design in the galactic databases. The surfaces seemed to recognize her approach and began to reconfigure themselves, creating a seal that adapted to her shuttle's docking port. It was clear that whoever had built this ship thought in terms of adaptive, living systems rather than rigid mechanical interfaces. As the airlock cycled, Sarah checked her suit systems one final time. All the protective measures were functioning perfectly, but she knew she was about to enter a realm where all the galaxy's accumulated knowledge might be useless. She would have to rely on the one thing humans had never lost, the ability to improvise, adapt, and find solutions that more advanced species might never consider. The inner airlock door opened with a sound like a deep breath being released, and Sarah Chen stepped forward into the unknown, carrying with her the hopes of every species that had found themselves too evolved to take such a risk. The corridor beyond was unlike anything in her experience, with walls that seemed to pulse with organic life while displaying clearly technological functions. Lights that might have been bioluminescent organs or sophisticated displays provided a gentle blue-green illumination that felt somehow alive. The air, according to her suit's readings, was safe for humans to breathe, though it contained organic compounds that would have been toxic to most other species. As she moved deeper into the ship, Sarah began to understand why every other species had found reasons to avoid this encounter. The vessel challenged every assumption about the separation between natural and artificial, organic and technological, alive and constructed. For species that had definitively chosen one path or another, this fusion would have been profoundly disturbing. But for humans, who had always lived in the messy intersection between their animal nature and their technological aspirations, it felt oddly familiar. Sarah found herself adapting to the ship's alien architecture with an ease that surprised her. She followed the pulsing light patterns deeper into the vessel, guided by intuition and the stubborn human belief that where there was life, there was hope. Behind her, transmitted through the crystalline communication device, she could hear the worried voices of the galaxy's greatest minds, all watching through her eyes as she ventured into territory none of them could safely explore. For the first time in galactic history, the most primitive species was leading the way into the unknown, armed with nothing but curiosity, adaptability, and the peculiar human conviction that every problem had a solution if you were willing to think outside the box. The ship's heartbeat grew stronger as she approached what she hoped was the bridge or control center, and Sarah prepared herself to meet whatever species had created this marvel of biotechnological integration. Whatever happened next, she knew that the galaxy would never look at humanity quite the same way again. The deeper Sarah ventured into the alien vessel, the more the ship seemed to respond to her presence. The bioluminescent panels along the walls brightened as she approached, creating a path of light that guided her forward. The organic surfaces under her feet felt almost springy, like walking on living tissue that adapted to provide better grip with each step. Through her communication device, she could hear the excited chatter of the scientists back on Harmony Station. Dr. Kethmore's crystalline voice crackled with electromagnetic interference. Dr. Chen, the energy patterns you're walking through would completely overload our neural matrices. The bioelectrical feedback would be fatal to our kind. The organic compounds in the atmosphere would dissolve our containment suits within minutes, added Dr. Jara's harmonious tones, barely audible through the static. Your primitive respiratory system is apparently immune to the acid-based metabolic byproducts. Sarah smiled grimly inside her helmet. Once again, humanity's biological simplicity was proving to be an advantage. Her basic carbon-based biochemistry was robust enough to handle environments that would destroy more sophisticated life forms. She pressed forward, following the ship's guidance system toward what she hoped was the bridge. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that took Sarah's breath away. The room was a perfect fusion of cathedral and garden, with soaring organic arches that pulsed with bioluminescent light. What appeared to be massive trees grew from the floor and ceiling, their branches intertwining to form living support structures. But these weren't just plants. They hummed with technological activity, their bark displaying holographic readouts, and their leaves functioning as interface panels. At the center of this biotechnological sanctuary stood a pool of luminescent liquid that served as some kind of command interface. Floating above the pool was a figure that made Sarah's heart race with both wonder and concern. The being was roughly humanoid in shape, but clearly not human. Its skin had a translucent quality that revealed complex circulatory systems flowing with phosphorescent fluid. Instead of hair, delicate tendrils extended from its head, each one connected to the ship's bio-neural network through organic cables that seemed to have grown rather than been attached. The creature's large, multifaceted eyes reflected the ship's internal lighting like precious gems. But it was clearly dying. The phosphorescent fluid in its circulatory system pulsed weakly, and several of the neural connections to the ship had gone dark. The being's breathing was labored, and Sarah's suit sensors detected massive system failures throughout its biological processes. "Hello," Sarah said softly, her translator broadcasting in multiple frequencies. "My name is Sarah. I'm here to help." The creature's eyes focused on her with obvious difficulty. When it spoke, its voice came not through the air but directly through the ship's bio-neural network, translated into words she could understand. You are not of the species that fled. You came alone." "Yes," Sarah replied, moving closer carefully. "The other species couldn't come. Their biology made it too dangerous for them, but humans, we're apparently too primitive to be easily harmed by whatever's affecting you." A sound that might have been laughter rippled through the ship's nervous system. "Primitive? Perhaps that is exactly what was needed. I am Quith of the Synthesis. I am the last of my kind, and I am dying." Sarah's heart sank. She had hoped to find survivors who could be rescued, not witness the extinction of an entire species. "What happened to your people?" Queth's tendrils dimmed as painful memories surfaced. "We achieved what every species dreams of, perfect harmony between biological and technological evolution. We became living ships, thinking cities, conscious ecosystems. We transcended the limitations of flesh and metal by becoming both and neither." The being gestured weakly toward the magnificent biotechnological chamber around them. "But in our perfection, we became vulnerable in ways we never anticipated. A plague came from deep space, not a disease in any conventional sense, but a pattern of information that corrupted the interface between biological and technological consciousness." Through her communication link, Sarah heard Dr. Kethmore's excited whisper, "A mimetic plague that targets biotechnological fusion? That explains why pure biological or pure technological species would be immune, but anything hybrid would be vulnerable. The plague spread through our entire civilization in a matter of days, Queth continued. One by one, the synthesis fell as the infection corrupted the delicate balance we had spent millennia perfecting. Ships lost their ability to distinguish between their biological and technological components. Cities forgot how to maintain the harmony between their organic and artificial systems. My people died not from disease, but from the collapse of their own evolutionary achievement. Sarah felt a chill of understanding. That's why all the other species stayed away. Any of them advanced enough to have biotechnological integration would be vulnerable to whatever killed your people. Indeed, Queth's mental voice grew weaker. The irony is profound. The most advanced species in the galaxy cannot risk contact with us because their advancement follows similar paths to ours. They have all moved beyond pure biological existence toward some form of technological augmentation. But humans haven't, Sarah said, pieces falling into place. We're still basically biological, with technology as external tools rather than integrated components. Queth's eyes brightened slightly. Your species exists in the intersection without crossing into true synthesis. You use technology without becoming it, enhance your biology without transcending it. This makes you immune to the plague that destroyed us, while still being sophisticated enough to understand our plight. Sarah began scanning the chamber with her suit's sensors, trying to understand the ship's condition. The readings were complex, but patterns were emerging. Queth, if the plague targets the interface between biological and technological consciousness, could we potentially separate those systems temporarily, like performing surgery to remove infected tissue? Impossible, Queth replied, but with less certainty than Sarah had expected. The synthesis is complete integration. Separation would mean death. Not separation, Sarah clarified, her mind racing. Isolation. We need to create barriers between the infected interfaces and the healthy core systems. Think of it like putting parts of your consciousness in quarantine while we clean the connections. Back on Harmony Station, the scientists were following Sarah's reasoning with growing excitement. Commander Vex High's voice came through the communicator. Dr. Chen, that approach might actually work. The principle is similar to compartmentalization protocols we use during system infections, but applied to living consciousness rather than pure technology. Dr. Thane's mechanical voice added, the biotechnological interfaces could be temporarily bypassed, allowing the biological components to function independently while the technological systems are purged and reset. But none of us could attempt such a procedure, Dr. Kethmore pointed out. The risk of infection through our own biotechnological links would be too great. Sarah looked at Queth, who was listening to the conversation through the ship's sensors. I don't have biotechnological links that can be infected. I could potentially perform the procedure manually, using external tools rather than integrated systems. Queth's tendrils pulsed with what might have been hope. You would risk your life for a dying member of a species you've never met? That's what humans do, Sarah replied simply. We're too stubborn to let people die when there might be a way to save them, and too primitive to understand when something is impossible. The next several hours were unlike anything in Sarah's experience. Working with guidance from the scientists on Harmony Station and information provided by Queth, she began the delicate process of temporarily isolating the ship's biological and technological systems. The procedure required her to interface directly with the ship's bio-neural network, but in a way no other species could safely attempt. While Zephyrians would need to link their crystal matrices to understand the system, and Corvins would need to integrate their mechanical components with the ship's technology, Sarah could simply use external tools and human intuition. She worked her way through the ship's nervous system like a surgeon, identifying infected connection points and installing temporary bypass systems that allowed biological and technological components to function independently. It was painstaking work that required her to crawl through biomechanical conduits barely large enough for a human, but too cramped for most of the larger galactic species. The quantum fluctuations in that conduit would destabilize our energy matrices, Dr. Jara observed, as Sarah squeezed through a particularly tight space. Human cellular structure appears remarkably resistant to quantum-level interference. The electromagnetic fields would corrupt our neural implants, Dr. Thane added, but biological nervous systems seem to filter out the harmful frequencies naturally. As Sarah worked, she began to understand something profound about humanity's place in the galaxy. Every other species had overcome their biological limitations through various forms of enhancement or evolution. The Zephyrians had transcended physical form to become living crystals. The Corvins had merged with their technology. The Altarians had developed telepathic abilities that connected them across vast distances. But humans had remained stubbornly, primitively biological. They had built tools instead of becoming tools. They had enhanced their environment instead of enhancing themselves. This approach, which seemed so inferior compared to the achievements of other species, had left them uniquely equipped to handle situations where advancement itself was a liability. "Sarah," Queth's voice came through the ship's speakers as she worked on a particularly complex neural junction. "I must ask you something that troubles me deeply. Why are you doing this? Your species gains nothing from saving me. You risk your life for a being you barely understand." Sarah paused in her work, considering the question. Through her communication link, she could hear similar conversations taking place on Harmony Station as the various species tried to understand human motivation. "I suppose," she said slowly, "it's because humans have never really gotten past the idea that life has value for its own sake. Other species seem to have evolved beyond such primitive emotional responses, but we're still stuck with this stubborn belief that every conscious being deserves a chance to survive." She resumed her work, adding, "Plus, we're curious. You represent knowledge and perspectives that are completely unique in the galaxy. From a purely selfish standpoint, allowing you to die would be like burning a library full of books we've never read." "Fascinating," came Dr. Kethmore's crystalline voice. "Humans appear to be motivated by a combination of altruism and intellectual curiosity that overrides logical risk assessment." "It's not logical," Sarah agreed, carefully installing another bypass around an infected neural cluster. "But logic isn't everything. Sometimes you need the illogical willingness to try impossible things." Hours passed as Sarah worked her way through the ship's systems. The procedure was working, slowly but effectively. As each infected interface was isolated and cleaned, Queth's condition began to improve. The phosphorescent fluid in the being's circulatory system pulsed more strongly, and the ship's bioluminescent displays grew brighter. But as Sarah neared completion of the procedure, Queth revealed something that changed everything. "Sarah," the being's mental voice was stronger now, but filled with urgency. "There is something you must know about the plague that destroyed my people. It was not natural. It was created as a weapon by a species that feared the growth of biotechnological civilization." Sarah's hands stilled in their work. "A weapon?" "The Devourers," Queth explained. "A purely mechanical species that views biological consciousness as a contamination of perfect technological purity. They created the plague to eliminate any species that achieved biotechnological synthesis, viewing such hybrids as abominations that must be destroyed." Through her communication link, Sarah heard the shocked silence from Harmony Station. Commander Vexhai was the first to speak. "Dr. Chen, if this plague was deliberately created, then whoever made it may still be active. The threat could extend far beyond this single ship." More than that, Queth continued, the ship's sensors detecting Sarah's elevated stress levels. The Devourers have been systematically hunting down hybrid species throughout this sector of the galaxy. I am not just the last of the synthesis. I am fleeing from our destroyers, and they are not far behind. As if summoned by the mention of their name, the ship's external sensors suddenly lit up with proximity alarms. On the main display, 3 angular vessels of pure metal and energy appeared at the edge of sensor range. Unlike the organic curves of the synthesis ship or the varied architectures of Harmony Station, these vessels were geometrically perfect. Crystalline structures that seemed designed by pure mathematical logic rather than any biological intuition. "The Devourers," Queth whispered, and for the first time since Sarah had met the being, she heard genuine fear in its mental voice. "They have found us." Back on Harmony Station, chaos erupted as the scientists detected the approaching ships. These vessels registered energy signatures unlike anything in their databases, pure technological systems with no biological components whatsoever. They were the opposite extreme from the synthesis, mechanical perfection that had eliminated every trace of biological origin. "Dr. Chen," Commander Vexhi's voice was urgent. "You need to extract immediately. Those ships are powering weapons systems that our computers can't even properly analyze." But Sarah looked at Queth, whose recovery was still incomplete. The being could survive now, but the ship's systems were still fragile. A hasty departure or sudden shock could undo all the work she had done. "How long until the repair process is complete?" she asked. "At least another hour," Queth replied. "But Sarah, you must leave. The Devourers will not hesitate to destroy your station if they believe it harbors biotechnological contamination." Sarah made a decision that surprised even herself. "Then we hold them off for an hour." "Dr. Chen," came Dr. Kethmore's shocked voice, "those ships are clearly superior to anything we possess. Our combined technology could not match even one of their vessels." "Maybe not," Sarah replied, her mind working furiously. "But they have the same weakness as every other advanced species. They're specialized. They perfected mechanical technology. But that means they've probably eliminated biological unpredictability entirely." She turned to Queth. "Your ship, it's designed to think biologically and technologically simultaneously, right? Could it potentially interface with other vessels, the way it interfaced with me?" Queth's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The ship could potentially establish biotechnological links with other vessels, but that would require their crews to accept partial biological integration. Most species would find that terrifying, Sarah finished, but not humans. We've never been purely technological. We've always been biological beings using tools. Through her communication link, she could hear furious debate erupting on Harmony Station as her proposal was translated and discussed among the various species. The idea of temporarily accepting biological integration was alien and frightening to most of them. But Commander Vexhi's ancient wisdom cut through the confusion. Dr. Chen may be correct. The Devourers have eliminated biological elements from their systems entirely. They would not expect us to voluntarily introduce such elements into our own technology. "It's crazy enough that it might work," Sarah said, watching the approaching Devourer ships on the display. "Sometimes the best way to fight advanced technology is with primitive solutions they've never considered." As the first Devourer vessels entered weapons range, Sarah Chen found herself coordinating a defense that combined the galaxy's most advanced technologies with the most primitive strategy imaginable: biological improvisation guided by human stubbornness and alien desperation. The next few minutes would determine not just the fate of Queth and Harmony Station, but potentially the survival of every biotechnological species in the galaxy. And it all depended on humanity's peculiar talent for finding impossible solutions to unsolvable problems. The Devourer ships opened fire, their weapons painting space with precisely calculated energy beams that could slice through any known technology. But they were about to discover that the universe still held surprises for those who thought they had eliminated all variables from the equation of existence. Sarah gripped the biotechnological interface, feeling the alien ship's consciousness merge with her own primitive human awareness, and prepared to show the galaxy's most perfect machines what biological chaos could accomplish when guided by stubborn human determination. The first Devourer energy beam lanced through space with mathematical precision, aimed directly at Harmony Station's main reactor. Sarah watched through the ship's biosensors as the deadly light approached, knowing that conventional shields would be useless against such perfectly calculated destruction. But at the last moment, Queth's ship responded in a way no purely technological system could have predicted. The vessel's bio-neural network suddenly sprouted thousands of new connections, linking directly to Sarah's environmental suit and through it to the communication systems of Harmony Station. In an instant, the ship's organic consciousness spread across multiple platforms, creating a distributed biological network that no mechanical intelligence could fully comprehend. All stations, except BioLink protocols, Sarah commanded, her voice carrying through both technological communication channels and the new biological network. Trust the process. We're about to become something the Devourers have never faced. On Harmony Station, the response was immediate but chaotic. Dr. Kethmore's crystalline form suddenly found itself partially interfaced with organic neural patterns for the first time in his species' evolution. Dr. Thane's mechanical implants began receiving biological feedback that his people's technology had been specifically designed to avoid. The Altarian Commander Vexhai felt his telepathic abilities expand as they merged with the ship's bio-neural matrix. The integration was uncomfortable, frightening, and completely alien to every species involved, but it was also extraordinarily effective. When the Devourer's energy beam struck Harmony Station's shields, instead of encountering predictable technological barriers, it met something unprecedented, a defense grid that responded with biological intuition rather than programmed protocols. The shields didn't simply absorb or deflect the energy, they adapted to it, learning from the attack pattern and evolving countermeasures in real time. "Impossible!" came a mechanical voice from the Devourer ships, transmitted on standard galactic frequencies. "Biological contamination detected in target technology. Recalibrating weapons systems." Sarah smiled grimly as she felt the alien ship's consciousness merge more fully with her human awareness. Through the bio-neural link, she could sense the confusion of every species on Harmony Station as they experienced biological integration for the first time. Dr. Chen, Commander Vexhai's voice came through both technological comms and biological neural links, creating a strange double echo effect. "This is extraordinary. I can feel the ship's thoughts, its instincts. It's like having access to an entirely different way of processing information." "Welcome to biological thinking," Sarah replied, her hands dancing across interfaces that were no longer purely technological or biological, but something entirely new. "Now let's show these Devourers what organic chaos can accomplish." The second Devourer ship fired a spread of precision-guided energy torpedoes, each one programmed to adapt to defensive countermeasures using pure mathematical logic. Against conventional shields, such weapons were nearly unstoppable. But as they approached the combined biotechnological network surrounding Harmony Station, something unprecedented happened. Queth's ship, now linked to the station's systems through Sarah's biological interface, began to sing. The sound wasn't audible in any conventional sense. It was a complex harmonic frequency that propagated through the bio-neural network, creating resonance patterns in every connected consciousness. Dr. Jara's gaseous form vibrated in harmony with the frequency. Dr. Kethmore's crystalline structure began to emit complementary harmonics. Even Dr. Thane's mechanical components started generating sympathetic vibrations. The approaching torpedoes, designed to process purely logical defensive responses, encountered something their programming had never anticipated, a defense that was fundamentally musical rather than mathematical. The harmonics created interference patterns that disrupted the torpedo's guidance systems not through technological jamming, but through biological rhythm that introduced chaos into their purely logical targeting algorithms. One by one, the precision weapons lost their ability to process the contradictory sensory data and detonated harmlessly in empty space. "This is what we lost," Queth's voice resonated through the bio-neural network, reaching every connected consciousness simultaneously. When species eliminate biological components from their technology, they lose access to intuitive, creative, adaptive responses. They become perfectly logical but incapable of true innovation. Through her interface with the ship, Sarah could feel the growing amazement of the Harmony Station scientists as they experienced biological consciousness for the first time. For species that had spent millennia perfecting technological solutions to biological limitations, the integration was revealing capabilities they had never imagined. "The processing speed is slower than pure technological systems," Dr. Kethmore observed, his crystalline thoughts now flowing through organic neural pathways. "But the pattern recognition capabilities are extraordinary. I can perceive solutions that pure logic would never identify." "It's intuitive rather than analytical," Dr. Thane added, his mechanical precision now enhanced by biological instinct. "Less efficient, but more creative. No wonder the Devourers want to eliminate it. Biological thinking represents genuine chaos in their perfectly ordered universe." The third Devourer ship, apparently realizing that conventional weapons were ineffective against biotechnological fusion, began powering up something different. Sarah's enhanced sensors detected massive energy buildup that registered unlike anything in the galactic databases. "Probability cascade weapon," Queth identified, fear resonating through the bio-neural network. "They're preparing to eliminate all possible outcomes except our destruction. Pure mathematics applied to reality itself." Sarah felt a chill of understanding. The Devourers weren't just technologically advanced. They had developed weapons that operated on fundamental physical principles, eliminating randomness and biological unpredictability from local space-time. Against such a weapon, even biotechnological adaptation would be useless because there would be no variables left to adapt to. "Time to try something really primitive," Sarah announced, her human stubbornness refusing to accept inevitable defeat. "Queth, can your ship interface with multiple biological consciousnesses simultaneously?" "Theoretically, but the neural load would be enormous. Most technological species lack the biological foundation to handle such integration." "But humans do," Sarah realized. "We've never transcended our biological nature, so we can handle pure biological integration better than anyone else." She opened her communication link to Harmony Station. "Commander, I need you to patch me through to Earth. Emergency priority. I need to speak with every human in this sector." Commander Vexhi's confusion resonated through both technological and biological channels. "Dr. Chen, there are over 50 human researchers, engineers, and diplomats scattered across a dozen stations in this sector. What could they possibly contribute to our current situation?" "Everything," Sarah replied, watching the Devourer weapon charge toward critical levels. "Humans are the only species in the galaxy that never abandoned pure biological consciousness. We're about to create the largest bio-neural network ever assembled." The next few minutes were chaos as human personnel across the sector were hastily connected to the expanding bio-neural network. Dr. James Wright, a human engineer on the Corvin Research Station, found himself linked to alien biological systems for the first time. Lieutenant Maria Santos, stationed with the Altarian Diplomatic Corps, felt her consciousness expand to encompass multiple ships simultaneously. Professor Chen Wei, Sarah's former colleague studying Zephyrian mathematics, discovered that his human brain could interface with crystalline thought patterns in ways that pure crystal consciousness could not. One by one, dozens of humans joined the network, their primitive biological neural systems serving as bridges between radically different forms of consciousness. The network grew exponentially, connecting not just the humans but every species they interfaced with, creating a web of biological and technological integration that spanned multiple star systems. Fascinating. Dr. Kethamore's voice carried a note of wonder as his crystalline consciousness found itself connected to dozens of biological minds simultaneously. Human neural architecture appears uniquely suited to serve as universal biological interfaces. Your brain structure is adaptable enough to translate between different forms of consciousness. It's because we never specialized, Professor Chen Wei observed from his distant station, his voice reaching the network through pure biological transmission. While other species evolved specific cognitive enhancements, humans remained generalists. Our brains can still adapt to almost any form of consciousness we encounter. The Devourer weapon reached critical charge just as the bio-neural network achieved its maximum expansion. When the probability cascade fired, it encountered something the mechanical intelligence had never imagined. A network of consciousness so complex and chaotic that it couldn't be reduced to mathematical probabilities. The weapon tried to eliminate randomness from local space-time, but everywhere it looked, it found biological consciousness, introducing new variables faster than they could be processed. Human intuition generated possibilities that pure logic couldn't predict. Zephyrian crystal consciousness refracted the probability calculations into infinite fractals. Corvin biomechanical interfaces created feedback loops that defied mathematical modeling. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers encountered a phenomenon that their perfect technology couldn't analyze, predict, or destroy. The combined chaos of biological consciousness enhanced by technological capability, but still fundamentally organic in nature. The probability cascade weapon overloaded and exploded, taking the third Devourer ship with it. The remaining two vessels found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't comprehend, a coalition of species that had voluntarily accepted biological contamination of their technological purity. "Retreat!" came the mechanical command from the surviving Devourer ships. "Unknown biological variables prevent probability calculation. Mission parameters cannot be fulfilled under current conditions." As the angular vessels departed, their perfect geometries disappearing into hyperspace, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment mixed with exhaustion. The bio-neural network had held together long enough to save Queth and Harmony Station, but maintaining such complex biological integration was taking its toll on everyone involved. "Network disconnection protocols initiating," Queth announced, the ship's systems beginning to separate the various consciousness interfaces. "Thank you, Sarah Chen of the humans. You have saved not just my life, but demonstrated something I thought lost forever." As the network dissolved and each species returned to their normal consciousness, Sarah found herself back in purely human awareness for the first time in hours. The experience left her feeling strangely isolated after the intimacy of shared biological consciousness. "What have we demonstrated?" she asked, genuine curiosity overriding her exhaustion. "That advancement need not require the abandonment of fundamental nature," Commander Vexhai replied, his ancient wisdom now enriched by the experience of biological integration. "Every species in this galaxy has transcended their biological origins in some way, believing that evolution meant leaving the past behind. But humans have shown us that there is power in remaining true to your fundamental nature while still reaching for the stars." Dr. Kethmore's crystalline form pulsed with new understanding. We have spent millennia perfecting our individual evolutionary paths, becoming magnificent but specialized. Humans remained generalists, adaptable, capable of interfacing with any form of consciousness they encounter. In doing so, you maintained capabilities that we sacrificed in our pursuit of perfection. Over the following days, as Queth's ship underwent full repair and the Harmony Station scientists processed their experience with biotechnological integration, Sarah found herself at the center of a philosophical revolution that was spreading throughout the galaxy. Species that had spent millennia perfecting their technological or biological evolution were suddenly questioning whether specialization had cost them more than it had gained. The encounter with the Devourers had demonstrated that pure technological advancement could lead to the kind of rigid perfection that sought to eliminate all biological randomness from the universe. But the successful defense had also shown that biological consciousness, enhanced by technology but not replaced by it, offered capabilities that pure technological systems could never match. The galaxy is changing, Queth observed as the synthesis ship prepared to depart for regions where other survivors of biotechnological species might still exist. Your species has reminded us all that there are multiple paths to advancement, and that the most primitive solution is sometimes the most sophisticated response to complex challenges. Sarah stood in the observation deck of Harmony Station, watching the beautiful biomechanical vessel disappear into hyperspace. Around her, scientists from dozens of species were engaged in conversations that would have been impossible before the crisis. Zephyrians were discussing the benefits of biological intuition. Corvins were exploring organic interfaces for their mechanical systems. Altarians were considering how biological consciousness might enhance their telepathic abilities. Dr. Chen, Commander Vex High approached, his expression thoughtful. I have been in communication with the Galactic Council. There is discussion of establishing a new research initiative, one focused on biotechnological integration rather than pure advancement in either direction. That sounds ambitious, Sarah replied. Indeed, and they have requested that humans lead the initiative. Your species' unique position as biological generalists makes you ideal candidates to facilitate integration between different forms of consciousness. Sarah smiled, thinking about the implications. For centuries, humans had felt inferior to the galaxy's more advanced species. They lacked the crystal clarity of Zephyrian thought, the technological integration of Corvin society, the wisdom of Altarian telepathy. But the crisis with the Devourers had revealed that humanity's apparent weaknesses were actually its greatest strengths. Humans had remained stubbornly, primitively biological while developing advanced technology. They had refused to transcend their nature while still reaching for the stars. They had maintained the flexibility and adaptability that more specialized species had sacrificed in their pursuit of perfection. I think, Sarah said slowly, that humans would be honored to help facilitate such integration. After all, we've always been better at bringing different things together than at perfecting any single approach. As news of the human-led biotechnological initiative spread throughout the galaxy, Sarah reflected on the strange turns that had brought her to this moment. She had come to Harmony Station as a junior researcher studying alien biology. She was leaving as the representative of a species that had unexpectedly become the galaxy's bridge between biological and technological consciousness. The encounter with Queth had taught her something profound about humanity's place in the universe. While other species had evolved beyond their origins, humans had carried their primitive nature with them to the stars. That primitive nature, with its stubborn adaptability, its illogical compassion, and its refusal to accept that problems were unsolvable, had proved to be exactly what the galaxy needed when faced with the unknown. In the months that followed, human researchers found themselves in demand throughout the galaxy as biological consciousness consultants. Their unique ability to interface with multiple forms of consciousness while maintaining their primitive biological foundation made them invaluable mediators in an increasingly complex galactic community. Dr. James Wright established the first biomechanical integration laboratory on the Corvin homeworld, helping their people explore organic interfaces that enhanced rather than replaced their technological abilities. Lieutenant Maria Santos became the galaxy's first biological consciousness ambassador, facilitating telepathic integration protocols between species that had never successfully communicated before. Professor Chen Wei founded the Institute for Primitive Solution Architecture, dedicated to finding simple answers to complex problems through biological intuition rather than technological analysis. And Sarah Chen became the director of the Galactic Biotechnological Integration Initiative, overseeing research that combined the best of biological and technological consciousness without requiring species to abandon their fundamental nature. The Devourers had intended to eliminate biological consciousness from the galaxy, viewing it as contamination of technological purity. Instead, their attack had catalyzed a renaissance of biotechnological cooperation that strengthened every species involved. Years later, when Queth returned to galactic space with other survivors of biotechnological species that had been hiding from the Devourer purges, they found a galaxy transformed. The rigid specialization that had made advanced species vulnerable to the mechanical perfection of the Devourers had been replaced by flexible integration that preserved the best of both biological and technological evolution. "You have accomplished something remarkable," Queth told Sarah during their reunion. "You have shown the galaxy that advancement and primitiveness are not opposites but complementary approaches to understanding the universe." Sarah smiled, watching as human children played with young Zephyrians in the biogardens of New Harmony Station, their primitive biological consciousness interfacing effortlessly with crystalline thought patterns that had once been considered incompatible with organic life. "I think we just reminded everyone that some problems are too complex for perfect solutions," she replied. "Sometimes you need the stubborn willingness to try impossible things with primitive tools and see what happens." As she spoke, Sarah realized that humanity had finally found its place in the galactic community, not as the most advanced species, not as the wisest or most powerful, but as the bridge builders, the problem solvers, the stubborn primitives who refused to believe that anything was truly impossible. In a galaxy full of magnificent specialization, humans had carved out their niche as the eternal generalists, the species that remained adaptable enough to handle whatever the universe threw at them. They were the ones who stayed when others fled, who tried when others declared something impossible, who found primitive solutions to sophisticated problems. And perhaps most importantly, they were the ones who remembered that behind all the technological advancement and evolutionary perfection, the greatest strength had always been the willingness to remain fundamentally, stubbornly, beautifully alive.